I know I have been very absent on this channel lately, but life has been certainly happening this fall. But you knew I was going to make time for this. You knew I was going to sit down and enjoy one of my favorite experiences on the sports calendar, Black Friday college football. Sitting in front of the television, eating my turkey, eating my mashed potatoes and gravy, eating my stuffing, and observing a Big Ten tradition unlike any other. The Iowa Hawkeyes defeating the Nebraska Cornhuskers. The black and gold now have won 11 of the last 13 games in this series. Since joining the Big Ten in 2011, Nebraska has beaten Iowa just 4 times. Boy, if there's one, you can say whatever you want about the Iowa football program. But if there's one thing they do, is they beat their rivals. I mean, they have dominated in recent history against Minnesota. I just talked about the recent history against Nebraska. Wisconsin is another series where they've dominated in the Heartland Trophy Series. As of late, they control the regional Big Ten West opponents. You can certainly say that. Now, this game on Black Friday, remember those guys the last time they were playing in Lincoln? Punts! With punts across their shirt. And, this was a very different game than 13-10. Hey, this was a game where the offenses were generating some success. It was about points over punts. Now, maybe the beginning of this game, the opening drive for either squad was looking pretty similar to what we saw the last 2 Black Fridays, 3 and out to start the game. But after those first 2 drives and all the way through up until halftime, how about this? 8 of the 9 drives during that span featured points of some kind. Whether it was a touchdown or whether it was a field goal, the offenses were moving the ball. They were having success in this first half, and it kind of left these defensive coordinators, these defensive coaching staffs kind of be like, okay, how do we pivot? How do we adjust to what the other side of the offenses are doing? But let's kind of go back to those 2 words that I just talked about a few moments ago. Touchdowns and field goals. One team capitalized on their drive, specifically late in the first half. The other team ended up settling for 3. And as you could have probably guessed, the team that's putting the ball into the end zone is the team that ended up winning and pulling away in this football game. Iowa finished drives, Nebraska didn't. It's as simple as that. Football can be a very simple game. Sometimes it's not very complicated. And when you look at how the first half played out, Iowa was able to kind of stretch their legs and stretch that lead a little bit with a 24-16 advantage going into the break because of finishing drives as opposed to Nebraska not doing so. Like late in the first quarter and then going into the second quarter, Nebraska had 3 consecutive drives ending in field goal, like right at the end of the first quarter, 11 plays, 62 yards. Early second quarter, great opportunity for the Huskers. Okay, they're trying to kick the ball away from Caden Weegan throughout this game, and Caden Weegan had a really nice return for Iowa to really set some things up. Iowa's had some really good starting field position early on in this game, but Nebraska as a whole was trying to keep the ball away, trying to do their best to keep the ball away from 21. Live ball, kind of short, kicked it right in front of Weege, they end up recovering. All right, this is our time to regain the momentum, punch the ball into the end zone. But they settled for a field goal. And then a 10-play, 55-yard drive stalled out for a 35-yard field goal. So when Nebraska's kicking field goals, on the other hand, Iowa's putting the ball into the end zone. During that stretch, 3 consecutive touchdown drives for the Iowa Hawkeyes. That was enough to create that one-possession game going into the second half. And it's like it still felt very close at that moment in time. But let's talk about some other first-half happenings because the phrase in football, tale of 2 halves, gets thrown around a lot. And this was, it was two very different games, first half versus second half. Like, for Nebraska, the offensive success that they were finding was what they've been finding pretty much all year, especially the back half of the year, and that's 21. That's Emmett Johnson. Emmett Johnson, especially since the Dylan Raiola injury, he has been the lone heartbeat. He has been the lone cylinder in the engine. He has been whatever analogy you want to make. He has been that source of offense for Nebraska. He eclipsed 100 yards 11 minutes into the game in this one. Now, running the ball for 84 yards on one carry, that will certainly help. But Nebraska's offensive line was forming some big holes early in this game. They deserve a lot of credit, especially against a good and active Iowa defensive line. So the offensive line and Johnson were really working together to move the football down the field. But as I'll maybe touch on a little bit later, they didn't really have much else. TJ Lateef could not throw the ball down the field. He kind of got rolled up on his leg, and he did not have the mobility. TJ certainly still has some developing to do in the passing game. It's going to be really interesting to see how the quarterback situation looks like for Nebraska next season. But, if you don't have that, right, and if in the second half, which we'll talk about in just a minute, where the run game kind of slows down and you don't have – and you're just a one-dimensional offense, it's going to be hard to sustain offensive success against a defense like Iowa for 60 minutes during a football game. Okay, let's talk about this sequence early in the second half. Actually, before I do, on one more thing on Emmett Johnson. How about 19 carries, 177 at the break? Those are some big-time numbers. Let's move a career day at the office for Emmett Johnson. Let's move on to the second half. Let's talk about that early sequence. Okay? Let's get it out there and let's talk about it. So Nebraska's receiving a punt. The first time they do so, it's a muff punt. Ja'Cory Barney has to go back and retrieve it near the 2-yard line. But a penalty comes out. Of course, you're going to make Iowa re-kick at that point. The following, it's muffed. He picks it back up. Carson Shire with the big hit. And then it's recovered in the end zone for a safety. But let's call a spade a spade. That certainly looked like targeting. And if it would have been targeting on Carson Shire, a couple of things would have happened. Carson Shire, right, their top linebacker, Iowa's top linebacker, would not have played for the rest of the game. That's number one. And number two, you would have not have 2 points on the board. I don't know what would have happened. We're playing the what-if game, I think, at this moment in time. But I think the correct call on that would have been targeting, at least from my point of view. The Gene Steratore and the CBS crew certainly thought that it should have been targeting as well. And that seemed to be like a huge pivot point. That seemed to be like a huge momentum shift in this game. Matt Rule was hyped up and he was emotional on the sideline. The crowd was emotional. The players out there were emotional as well. And it didn't seem like Nebraska was going to be able to bounce back from that. That's kind of the way it seemed, right? Iowa eventually got back into the end zone. They took the lead, and Nebraska did not score the rest of the way. That was a really tough, I think, situation for the Huskers out there. But that was a huge shift, and that's when it really started to appear. Okay, Iowa's got control of this game. Now that Nebraska's kind of down double digits, they can't just pound 21. They can't pound 21. They can't pound 21. And now they got to try to throw the football over the top. And here's the thing. When TJ tried to throw the football over the top to the Isaiah Hunters, to the Dane Keys of the world, Iowa was in their hip pocket all afternoon long. There was no room to breathe out there on the perimeter. No room to breathe. So when you continue, and then when your defense continues to wear down, some really good second half adjustments, I thought, from Iowa to be able to slow down Emmett Johnson. And as I said, as the lead continues to grow, Nebraska feels, hey, we got to put the ball in the air. We got to try to create some big plays down the field, and it just wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. After Lateef got rolled up, did not have the mobility. The mobility was not an option. TJ Lateef did not, even before he got rolled up, they didn't really utilize that skill set of him being that running quarterback in the backfield to kind of create another layer into their offense. But, man, I love watching this Iowa team. I mean, I talked about 2 years ago. You talk about, this pre-Tim Lester Iowa, completely different. I love to see the evolution. Every time Iowa kind of takes the field, they have a certain way that they're going to play. Like, they're not going to be ultra explosive, but I think what they do really well. Mark Gronowski, over 200 total yards in this matchup on the ground, through the air. I mean, he's just been so fun to watch this year. 166 through the air, 64 on the ground, totaling 3 touchdowns in this game. Kamari Moulton and the Iowa run game, they started to get it going a little bit more in that second half. And that's when, like I said, the Husker defense started to wear down and started to wear down and started to wear down a little bit more. When DJ Vahami, the tight end for Iowa, when he got his hands on the football, he made big plays. It's successful run game. It's good defense, shutting out Nebraska in the second half. It's tight ends. This is the way Iowa is supposed to look. When Iowa is humming, this is the kind of thing I think you come to expect. TJ Lateef, when all was said and done, 9 of 24 for 64 yards. The total yardage was within 80 yards. And I think that was a big part of that, of course, is what Nebraska was able to do in the second half. But nothing doing a lot in the second half of this ball game for them. Let's kind of just like take a moment to take a deep breath and kind of look at these two teams and look at these two seasons. Iowa, it's going to be the season of almost. They were saying it on the broadcast. Ross Tucker was saying it on the CBS broadcast. This is one of the better Iowa teams in recent memory. I thought, considering the elevation of their offense and their defense getting better over the season and staying at that Phil Parker type of level, it's going to be really hard if you're a Hawkeye fan to look back and not say what if about this season. Iowa State is one that really jumps out to me. That was pretty painful, but I mean, the way you played against Indiana, the way you played against Oregon, the way you played against USC, and then against USC, it kind of falls out from you. The bottom falls out from you in the second half, and you don't do much of anything after running the ball really well in the first half. It's going to be, if you get 2 wins, Iowa State and one other, that's maybe an Iowa team that could have found their way into the college football playoff. But look, there's a lot of teams out there that maybe have a lot of what ifs and a lot of missed opportunities, and they're a lot worse than 8-4. I can certainly say that. For the Nebraska Cornhuskers, everybody was anticipating the year 3 jump for Matt Rule. And I looked at Nebraska's roster at the beginning of the season. I said this on the big preview, I just didn't see it. I saw that. I'm like, okay, the schedule might line up. All right, they're looking pretty good in terms of that. But I just didn't see the talent. I thought they still had problems in the offensive line and the defensive line. Turns out I was right on the defensive line, because this was a team that consistently did not play well against the run this season. But if you would have told me coming into the season, Nebraska's going to lose to Michigan, they're going to lose to Minnesota, USC, Penn State, and Iowa, I'd be like, yeah, okay, that's probably not too far-fetched. But it just kind of feels a little bit different, especially the way the season ended, especially considering what happened to Penn State. It happened to Penn State. I mean, the last 2 games, you lose by a combined score 77-26. That is a sour taste in your mouth. Look, I know Nebraska has invested a ton into Dylan Raiola being the savior of their program. And when he goes down, you still got to find a way. But that's the thing. When he went down, all of the everything went onto the shoulders of Emmett Johnson. And Emmett Johnson had a great season down the stretch, but they just didn't have enough around him. They didn't have enough on the rest of the team to be able to respond when 15 goes down. Really interested to see what's going to happen at quarterback. Rumors of Dylan Raiola's transfer, maybe entering the transfer portal during this cycle in January, is being floated out there. This was a season I think a lot of people thought in Lincoln that they could make that jump up, but we're kind of just sitting in the same old spot right now after a Matt Rule extension. This was some fun football. I really enjoyed this particular football game. All right, folks. Until next time, whenever that may be, I'm Big Ten Ted. We'll see you in the next one.